Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Daredevil and the Black Widow, issue number 92, dated October 1972. And take a look at the cover here. The cover and the story very much reads sort of like a DC comic. So this story is a little atypical from what we would normally see from Marvel. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually a pretty decent story, but it feels structured more like a DC comic. Also, the artwork within the story and the cover, it's by Gene Colan, but again, it's a very atypical job of Gene Colan, because there's a lot of things that you normally would expect to see in a Gene Colan comic that we don't really see in this issue. This is also an issue that I had never read prior to last week. So this is pretty new. And Daredevil's backstory at this time, honestly, is a little new to me. Daredevil, like Thor and a couple other comics, were ones that I never really cared for. Most of it had to do with I just simply did not care about their backstories. Like with Thor, I didn't care about Asgard. And with Daredevil, I kind of didn't care about his life as a lawyer. So I tended to avoid reading these comics. We'll take a look at the cover here. It was obviously during the Kung Fu craze of the 1970s here. As we see the villain is the Blue Talon. I don't think he's been around too much, but it's clearly one of these Kung Fu type tropes here. We also see Daredevil as he's about to be sliced and diced. However, there's two people coming to his rescue. One is the Black Widow, and the other is actually Matt Murdock himself. And the cover does ask the readers, what's going on? Matt Murdock rushing to save the man without fear. So again, this is sort of like a DC premise. So, and there's a little twist. I have to admit that I thought I'd figured out the twist, and I turned out to be wrong, mostly based on who it was, not what was going on. So that in itself kind of made this a rewarding issue to read, but this issue also would not have made me a Daredevil fan either. I just would have been like, hey, I spent my 20 cents well. So we on the cover we're given one title, but in the book we actually see another. So on the cover, they're telling us the Blue Talon strikes, and the name of this story is On the Eve of the Talon. And we'll take a look at the creative team. We see the writer was Jerry Conway. He did for the most part a pretty good job. He kept me interested in this issue, so that in and of itself makes it a successful story. We see Gene Colan. It was a pretty good job from Gene. It's very conventional, I would say. So a lot of the kind of like the way that Gene Colan would sort of be very creative with his panels, you don't really see that in this story. It's kind of structured very basically. The inker, I should say, is Tom Palmer. Tom Palmer did some great work, particularly with Neil Adams. He was a top-notch inker. George Costanza is the letterer, and Roy Thomas is the editor. So even though in the credits they're claiming that Stan Lee is truly the man who made this possible, we could see underneath that no, he did not. So we go into the action. We see Matt Murdock here. He's absolutely livid. He is wearing an ascot. 1970 San Francisco. Hey, he went with the flow, and he's taken this peaceful Buddha figurine, and he smashes it against this huge, expensive framed mirror. We see an image of the Black Widow. Honestly, not very well drawn. Doesn't really look like her, but nevertheless, it's supposed to stand for her. And apparently the reason why Matt Murdock is so angry is he's angry at the Black Widow. and he's angry at the Black Widow because he feels that she left him. Like she hasn't been returning his calls. You know, he's been going to her place where he is right now, smashing her property, and he hasn't found, you know, any sign that the Black Widow is around, whether she's in San Francisco or not. No contact. Doesn't assume that, hey, maybe that she confronted a supervillain and she might be forcibly detained. No, Matt Murdock, he is not thinking that. His immediate reaction is, she left me. And the way he's acting out emotionally, he's saying, how could she? I am so wonderful. How could anyone hurt me like this? So this guy, as angry as he is wallowing in self-pity. Then we see that he actually has company. And his company is Ivan, who is the Black Widow's chauffeur. And he's basically a full-time employee. He's also an assistant to the Black Widow whenever she's crime fighting. It's sort of like that show Heart to Heart, where they had the chauffeur Max, and Max was always involved in the Heart's hobby of solving crimes. So poor Max his life was put into danger, you know, just to please these two rich people who, you know, whose side hobby was, you know, solving murder mysteries. So hopefully maybe Black Widow's paying this guy more. Of course, they're both from Russia. So maybe she's threatening to have him deported, and that kind of keeps him quiet. But nevertheless, as Matt is basically going full incel on the Black Widow, Ivan's taken a more level-headed view of this. He says, "What makes you think you're so great that she left you, and that you need to destroy her property to vent to the world?" And he's even questioning whether, you know, was Natasha really falling for you? I mean, you kind of have that huge ego there, even though if you can't see it, if you know what I mean. So kind of like, you know, I was kind of like throwing some insults and shade Matt's way. Ivan is calling Matt out, saying that it's really your ego you care about. So you're not really concerned about Natasha, you're really concerned about your hurt ego. Because if you were really concerned about Natasha, you wouldn't be in her house ranting and raving and destroying all her property. You would actually be going out there and searching for her to actually see what's going on rather than jumping to these assumptions. Matt Murdock, you know, he's kind of impressed with this, I guess, type of, lack of a better word, profile that Ivan had made of Matt, basically admitting, yeah, you know, you're right, you really should be a great psychiatrist. Ivan is saying, yeah, I know that, but the thing is that in my world, I have to be that. I have to, like, you know, I have to keep these very rich people happy. Natasha has a lot of money, and sometimes they need pampering and babying. And, you know, you have the privilege of not having to deal with these crybabies. But, you know, with me, it's unavoidable. So anyway, Ivan pulls out a map of San Francisco. He's saying, you know, the best place to actually search for her is where she lives, and that's San Francisco. And Ivan is letting Matt know that Natasha, the Black Widow, she's been hanging out with a guy he refers to as a creep called Danny French. So apparently Natasha has been spending a lot of time with this guy Danny French. He did not make a good impression on Ivan, but nevertheless he's aware of his existence, and he's kind of letting Matt in on some of what he knows. They're talking about some type of globe. And this globe comes up a few other times in this story. I have no idea what it is. So the two men decide that they're going to actually, you know, do something productive and search for Natasha. she has an elevator in her place, which is kind of nice. I've been to San Francisco multiple times, and I have been into these beautiful buildings that turn out have no elevators, and I've had to walk, 3, 4 flights up. So anyway, it turns out that Ivan is heading toward the garage. He's getting the car out because when Black Widow is out there superheroing, she has a Rolls Royce available to her. So, when she comes back in style. Ivan is thinking to himself that that Matt wasn't entirely truthful with him, because when he brought up the subject of the globe, Matt played it off like he didn't know anything about it, but this didn't ring true to Ivan. So Ivan is thinking about that Matt might be lying about, this particular item. Or maybe Natasha kind of made Matt double, triple keep it a secret. So anyway, so Ivan kind of has, a little suspicious of Matt. Then we see the two of them, they're driving off. Matt is dressed as Daredevil, but for some reason he's not in the car. He's swinging as he's following Ivan. This doesn't make any sense to me. San Francisco is not friendly to heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil. Guys who require buildings to actually swing from one to another, you're going to have a hard time in San Francisco, because there's only really a few places that you can do that effectively. I suspect most of the time you're going to be on top of a bus if that's how you're going to patrol the city. We do see here that that Ivan is driving down Lombard Street. Lombard Street is the most prestigious street in San Francisco, and it's still a city I would recommend people to go to. I loved it there. You can also go to Oakland and get legal mushrooms, but this is one of really the spectacular things about San Francisco is Lombard Street, and seeing the drivers go down and seeing it at night. It's beautiful. That's why they call it the City of Lights. You see it from Lombard Street. Sorry, the gummies are kind of kicking in. So anyway, Daredevil, he's swinging along. It looks like he's near Marketplace or something. And he comes across what he sees as a crime. It looks like two knockaround guys. They're pushing around this storekeeper. And Daredevil is thinking to himself that, hey, I really, really, really want to find out what's happening to Natasha, so it's really important that I check the city in hopes of finding her. But at the same time, he's debating on whether he should actually intervene in what seems to look like a crime in action. However, I guess Daredevil's better angels get the better of him, and he decides to intervene because his basic attitude is, listen, there's no crime that's too small for me, not to interfere with. So anyway, we see that the shop owner, he's getting slapped around by these two guys. The shop owner is explaining that he doesn't have any cash in the store, that he already, he gave his son or some boy who works there the deposit to drop off at the bank. The two guys aren't buying that. They're aware that, the shop owner has no such employee. And then one of the knockaround guys starts mentioning, hey, we heard about you handling some punk. There was some punk who was trying to rob your store, and you shot that punk. And then we're told that, quote, the punk was my brother. So rather than this being a straightforward robbery, this kind of looks like a revenge thing. And apparently this guy wants to avenge his brother, the punk. Okay. I mean, hey, he's my bro. He's my punk, but he's a bro. And Daredevil interferes. He crashes into the two men. He recognizes one of them at least, Willie Boy. So Willie Boy's the one who had the punk brother, and he's also mentioning the younger brother. So he's aware of this shooting, Daredevil. And he's basically saying, listen, Willie Boy, you failed your brother. You should have been a better example to him. And he put himself in that situation by his own means. So Daredevil's not sympathetic toward this guy, Willie Boy. Then we see Willie Boy pulls out a gun. He fires at Daredevil. He's defending his brother here. He's saying that, listen, he was a good kid, but he made a single mistake. But Daredevil is pointing out that that's all it takes. You can make, just one small mistake, and your life can end, like that. And Daredevil's saying that rather than you trying to get revenge on your brother, you should maybe reflect on this, failure of yours, because you're his big brother, and just sort of try to make yourself a better person. So Daredevil is giving him some really heartfelt advice while smashing him in the head and kicking him, and giving him doing everything he can to get a concussion. So he's maybe he figures that the lesson will kind of extra stick that way. His partner gets into the fray. The two guys, Daredevil calls them losers, and saying, "Listen, guys, there's no hope. There's no hope for you. There's no hope for you." It turns out the knockaround guys, they're injured, so the fight has been taken out of them. And before I go back to the story, I'm going to look at the Marvel bullpen bulletins. Stan soapbox. Stan has nothing to say. He's basically introducing what's going on with Marvel. Marvel at this time was really starting to expand their titles. I think it was around this time that Marvel got out of a really bad distribution deal that they had in the 60s. And the reason that deal was so bad was that the corporation that owned the distributor also owned DC Comics. And because of this kind of conflict, DC had some control over what Marvel could do in terms of how many titles they can publish and so forth. In 1972, I think they finally got out under that deal, and they really started to expand their titles. So they're kind of talking about some of the new stuff that's coming out. Talking about Doc Savage. They licensed that because they had great success with Conan. Doc Savage was not successful. They're talking about Hero for Hire. That was successful. Dracula, Werewolf by Night, and Warlock. I believe what happened with Dracula was that the title was actually still selling pretty well when it was canceled, but I think Marvel's lawyers got nervous about the copyright laws, and I think what happened is that when they initially created the Tomb of Dracula, they might not have been fully compliant with those laws because they were still kind of vague. So I think what I had heard was that Marvel's lawyers were, it's best to get rid of this title because it might cause you legal headaches later on. They're also talking about Werewolf at Night. That was also a long running title too. I think they might have canceled it around the same time. They're talking about The Shadow, although that ended up being with DC. And there's another item talking about Doctor Strange, and pointing out that both Frank Brunner, and Barry Smith, they were both working on this storyline. I think what happened was Barry Smith came out with his 2 issues, and I think they were working on a direction to take the character. Then for some reason Smith had to drop out, and then that's when Frank Bruner took over the chores, and that's what he's best known. Those were really good comics. I would totally recommend them for anyone. Talking about Journey to Mystery, they're talking about some of the talent. Billy Graham, who was drawing Black Panther at the time. Mentioning Mike Trimpe, who's Herb's brother. Talking about Wayne Boring. Oh yeah, they're releasing also Ant-Man, and they're also mentioning some of the old guard like Ramita and Buscema. There's a lot of nothing in here. Yeah, and the rest of it's just nonsense. Not really interesting. I'll take a look at the Marvel checklist. See what was out at the time. Fantastic Four 127. I don't remember that issue, honestly. Spider-Man 113. Yeah, this is a storyline and character based on The Godfather. They even mentioned The Godfather. So the movie The Godfather had so much juice at this time where Marvel was like willingly, we're gonna tie ourselves into this. And I remember it was like Doc Ock versus Hammerhead. I didn't think that was a very good issue. Though there were a couple moments I did enjoy. Hulk 156. This is when the Hulk actually has to face himself, but with a version that has Dr. Banner's brain. Talking about Journey to Mystery. I don't care about that. The Gunhawks, #1. This is Reno Smith and Kid Cassidy. I didn't care about the Westerns. Although, when I saw that Mario Van Peebles movie, I did speak to him, and I actually gave him Gunhawks #7. Because his movie was a Western, and it was largely focused on African Americans who did play a role in the Old West. And he got a kick out of that comic. We see Conan the Barbarian, issue #19. That was a beautifully drawn issue. Barry Smith put his heart and soul into that two-parter. Then we see Fear #10. This is the release of the Man-Thing. And this came out a couple of months after the Swamp Thing. And there was always a controversy, how these two very similar but, distinctively different characters came about. And they figured that the creative teams of both these characters, they were all friends. And they were all talking amongst each other. And the thinking is that when Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson were working on the Swamp Thing, they were sort of sharing ideas with their fellow colleagues. And one of them, I think, was Jerry Conway. And that's when Jerry Conway got the idea, hey, Marvel should make their kind of Swamp Thing. But again, it was distinctively different. Because one had intelligence, one didn't, and so forth. So if you were buying, you should have gone for Fear #10 and Conan #19. Let's see, there are other comics that are out. Thor #204, don't care. Avengers 106. No, I'm sorry, 104. Avengers 104 is the earliest comic I remember reading. And I think maybe 103. I read them both at the same time. Captain America 154, don't know. Hero for Hire 3. Submariner 54. Submariner was a very underrated comic. They had a lot of good stories around this time. Iron Man 51. Defenders #2 was out. Yeah, and they had some war-related comic books. So anyway, go back to the story. We see Daredevil, he's going to sort of leave things at this. And part of the reason is that he doesn't really like that shopkeeper. Because on one hand, what the shopkeeper did was legal. And what the shopkeeper did was the morally right thing. Someone was threatening him. He had the right to defend himself. But he feels that that shopkeeper also kind of took advantage of the situation, to sort of behave more violently than he normally would. Basically, he said he was gun happy and a little trigger happy, so he wasn't particularly sympathetic to that shopkeeper. But he's going to leave the shopkeeper and Willie to their own devices. He's saying, listen, you guys sort it out. Maybe you two will learn a lesson and you'll be better people afterwards. Maybe you won't, but I'm not going to be involved. So that's where Daredevil stands. Then we see a limousine here. And normally we would think it's probably Ivan patrolling, I guess, the North Beach area of San Francisco. That's what it looks like. And we can see it isn't, because the chauffeur is dressed like Ivan, but he's not Ivan. And we see that there's an older individual in the back seat. He's making it clear that he wants to be taken home immediately. We take a look at Chinatown in San Francisco. That's in the North Beach area. So anyway, they're driving. It looks like they're driving over the Golden Gate Bridge. And they're heading toward Berkeley. Yeah, you can, if you're in San Francisco, you can use the BART system to get to Oakland, and you can get to downtown Berkeley. A couple of times I had gone to the Berkeley Comic Con prior to the COVID situation, and it was the best Comic Con I ever been to. They had the best dollar bins or the best $3 bins. All of that changed after COVID because the prices went skyrocketing. So anyway, we see this nice mansion here, kind of like, in this kind of outskirts, away from any type of urban center. I honestly don't know if they have such homes in the Berkeley area, because I was only in downtown Berkeley. And you have to be careful when you're in downtown Berkeley, because there's a lot of homelessness, but in San Francisco, you kind of get the pesky ones who want, spare change. But if you're in Berkeley and you encounter homeless, you get some of the crazy ones. And that's not slurring, that's being honest. So anyway, it turns out that the man in this limousine, he's known as Damian Dran. And apparently he was observing Daredevil. So as Daredevil was sort of slapping around these guys, this guy got an opportunity to see Daredevil in action. And apparently it looks like he's a kind of a shady, shadowy underworld figure. And obviously Daredevil's there to fight crime and to stop evil. And this guy, his business is that, crime and evil. So he has to size up his opponent or possible opponent. He's saying that, yeah, this guy can be dangerous for me. So I have to be careful, because my plan, I've been working on this plan for years. I'm going through it. It's close to fruition, and I don't want Daredevil screwing things up. So he sort of has this underground passageway, sort of like, the false, walls or panels that leads to a laboratory. And it turns out that in the laboratory, we see more than two individuals, but the main two individuals are the Black Widow and apparently this guy, Danny French. So the two of them are basically tied up in this chair. They're being held hostage. It looks like they're both drugged, with Black Widow sort of getting the worst of it. So they're sort of being held incapacitated, partially because they're basically drugged. Mr. Dran, he's kind of going through his Goldfinger type, villain questioning. And he wants to know whether this guy, Danny French, is going to give up any information about that globe. And Danny's saying, listen, don't bore me with these questions. Just beat the crap out of me. Because that's what's going to happen, because I'm not going to give you this information. and the criminal here, he's kind of like, we'll see about that, toward Mr. French, but because apparently they have a mind probe device, and they're gonna check and see whether whether they can kind of get a direct answer that way. So then we go into a flashback, and we see Danny French, and he's with the Black Widow. And this is not a romantic situation. It looks like the two are working together. So they're kind of more like undercover cops. And we see that there is tension between the two, because apparently a lot of the lead is being directed by the Black Widow. However, it seems like Danny really doesn't like this. I guess he seems to be a little chauvinistic. So he kind of doesn't like this interloper. He doesn't like this female interloper kind of telling him his business. But then again, he is partnering with her. So he knows that she's there for a good reason. But nevertheless, she doesn't really like the Black Widow's direct leadership style. The two are driving. There's a blowout. This looks more like what you would expect from Gene Colan, as you really see this kind of spectacular blowout and crash of the vehicle that the two of them were driving in. And the dialogue box is making note that they were the hunters and now they're the hunted. Again, things can change very quickly. It turns out that Mr. Dran is stepping out of his limousine. So he was personally there as this action was going on. Kind of similar to the way that John Gotti and Sammy Gravano were there when they decided to whack Paul Castellano, their mob boss. So anyway, it looks like Mr. Dran, he's taking a personal interest in this. He's not the guy who's going to send out the servants if he feels he can do the job. And it turns out that he's a master of what you would expect, karate. He delivers a karate blow to Black Widow. Black Widow, she's kind of like taken out of her game because of this auto crash, but nevertheless, she is just fast enough to avoid this blow. So this Dran guy, he's kind of a formidable opponent. Black Widow gets the best of him. However, it turns out that the Black Widow is betrayed, and she's betrayed by Danny French. And it's not because Danny French is working with Mr. Dran. He was really tired of the Black Widow's attitude. Plus, he felt that he could handle this guy better than she did. So he took the attitude that he was going to knock her out unconscious, then take care of Mr. Dran, kind of like, then, wake her up and say, hey, sorry, babe, but, I had to take over. So that was his initial plan. However, it completely falls flat on his face because it turns out that Mr. Dran is owning his ass at this point. So they were both captured basically because of this guy, Danny French. But the thing is, Danny French is also the guy who has the information that Mr. Dran wants. Because the Black Widow knows of the globe, but it seems like Danny has more information on it. Danny is like, kind of telling him to take a walk here. And then it turns out that Mr. Dran is just going to start torturing them. And this is his way of kind of like teaching them a lesson. So anyway, we see Ivan. Ivan is back in Natasha's place. He's talking to Daredevil. They were both on patrol. And it turned out that neither of them had any luck in their patrol of San Francisco. Ivan feels terrible. He notices that Matt looks terrible because they've both been going without a lot of sleep. But, Matt's kind of pulling out that unrealistic, hey, I'm a 24-hour guy. and sleep is a detriment to what I have to do, and that's to find Natasha. But Ivan is correctly saying, listen, you physically can't do that, and if you could, you would probably be more of a hindrance than anything else in that condition. So he's saying, dude, whether you like it or not, you're gonna have to take a few hours to get some sleep. Matt kind of sort of understands. So he doesn't want to go to sleep, but at the same time, he's not rushing out to leave either. Ivan turns on the TV. They want to see the news. And they're watching the news, and it turns out the breaking story is that one of the reporters has broken who Daredevil is. Because Daredevil had just moved to San Francisco, I believe about 4 issues earlier. And we see this reporter who kind of looks a little like Rona Barrett, who is a famous gossip columnist. And she was also a TV celebrity. So it seems like they noticed that, hey, Daredevil has left New York to San Francisco. But we also know that this really super high-profile lawyer left New York to come to San Francisco to practice law. Because, it's not like Matt Murdock, took a huge chunk of money with him to San Francisco. He still had to, pay the rent and stuff like that. So he kind of took his law practice from one city to another. This reporter noticed this and kind of sized up their physiology and is basically saying that, yeah, Matt Murdock is Daredevil. There's been a lot of criticism, and it's been mentioned in the letters page that, like, Marvel heroes all tend to be, in New York, situated in New York. And it kind of makes sense because in a city that large, it's easier for, like, someone with this secret identity to kind of blend in and out. Whereas if you go to a, quote, smaller city, then maybe, this thing is a little more noticeable that, this individual and that individual, they might be connected. So anyway, Matt's flipping out. His identity has been basically aired on local TV. And turns out that Matt is really pissed off. He calls the news media irresponsible idiots. And as if they have an obligation to Daredevil personally. However, Daredevil, Matt and Ivan aren't the only ones watching the news. It turns out that Mr. Dran is watching the news. Mr. Dran is a very oddly drawn character in that it's clear that he's not white, that he's Asian. It looks like this could be more Japanese than Chinese. I honestly don't know the difference. I like karate films, but I was never a big karate person, so I never bothered to learn the various differences between, karate and judo and all that, or what culturally, came from China, what culturally came from Japan. But the thing that I'm trying to get to here is that Marvel sometimes was very reluctant to draw characters that weren't white. And it looks like Gene Colan is trying to have it both ways by making this guy kind of look Euro-Asian, but looking more Euro than Asian. This, what I described, also was a problem with Karate Kid in Legion, because the character was supposed to be Asian, or at the very least Euro-Asian, but sometimes some of the artists drew him as 100% Asian. Sometimes he was drawn 100% Caucasian, and sometimes you catch those that were in the middle. So that's the thing going on with Mr. Dran, which I believe is a Chinese name. So anyway, Mr. Dran, he's gloating over the Black Widow because he knows that Daredevil and the Black Widow work together. So he's going, haha, your partner or maybe your boyfriend, his identity has been exposed to everybody, including me, and we can make use of that. So Mr. Drain does make use of this, and it turns out that he releases a henchman that is super powerful and super loyal to him, and this is the Blue Talon. And he makes a kind of a spectacular entrance as he smashes through this lab door. There is so much police action going on in the background. So anyway, this looks more like a samurai warrior than something that would be, Chinese, because they're not really sure is Dran Chinese or is he Japanese? And San Francisco does have a Japantown. So anyway, Blue Talon comes out. He's wondering whether the two in the chair are the ones that he wants killed. He's ready to do it, but Mr. Dran tells him, "No, that's not who I want you to go after. I want you to go after Daredevil." So that's who the Blue Talon has been assigned to kill. And then I'm not sure what's happening here. Okay, this is why it's kind of a DC comic book. So anyway, we're assuming that Mr. Talon wants the others. Yeah, he still wants information on the globe. So he's feeling that if he sicks the Blue Talon on Daredevil, that will kind of loosen the Black Widow's tongue. So anyway, it turns out that Ivan and Daredevil, they're both searching the city. Ivan is kind of shaking down kind of these fringe characters on the kind of the peripheral of the criminal world. It turns out he did find one informant. He knows a little information about Danny French, so he doesn't know where they may possibly be, but he gives him some info on Danny French. And he says that he's an undercover cop. Or a private eye. And he says, listen, he has an office on Claymore Street. You can just go there and check yourself. So Ivan goes to this to the office of Danny French, who's a private eye. So he's not necessarily working with legal enforcement and administration or entity. He's actually kind of a private eye doing this for hire. He's pretty loyal to his client because he's willing to be tortured to protect that information. Ivan walks up the stairs, which is normal if you're in San Francisco, and he crashes through the door. So he wants to see whether Danny French has any information in his files that will tell him where maybe him and, more importantly, Natasha is. Okay, before I get back to the story, I'm going to talk about the letters page. The letters page weren't specific to the story, to the issue that they're talking about here, which is issue 188. They're more talking about the move that was announced in that issue, that Daredevil is going to leave New York and he's going to go to San Francisco. And for the most part, most of the fans seem to like that move. Jerry Conway was among a few writers, both at DC and at Marvel, who wanted maybe having a few characters in San Francisco. So it's not surprising that Jerry was able to sort of talk Marvel into saying, hey, take Daredevil out of the New York scene and move him to, say, San Francisco. Maybe this will help, kind of like, rev up the story, and also might encourage editorial to do this with other heroes. For the most part, most of the fans approve of the move. There's one who says, no, Daredevil's a New Yorker, and it just doesn't feel right. So, yeah, I remember I enjoyed some of the San Francisco issues. Okay, so we go back to the story. Ivan is ransacking the office. He's not finding anything. Although I will say, he's ransacking it very neatly. So, Ivan's aware that, hey, there's going to be a maid coming in, and I'm not going to dump too much work on her because we're kind of like doing the same thing. So anyway, Ivan realizes that this is going to be a lot harder than he expected. And then it turns out the Blue Talon is driven to, I think he's driven to Danny French's office. So Ivan has the unfortunate luck of being in the office at the same time the Blue Talon was going to show up at the office. Ivan got there a little bit sooner, and I think Ivan sees that he's coming up. The Blue Talon is scaling the walls. Then suddenly, out of a tree comes Daredevil. And he shouts, he makes his presence known. Again, this kind of looks like Gene Colan artwork. I'm thinking Gene might have been under the weather. So anyway, Daredevil, he directly encounters the Blue Talon. They're talking about martial arts. Again, the karate craze was just starting to really rev up in the U.S. at the time. The two are fighting. The Blue Talon is definitely a formidable opponent. Also, like Gladiator, the Blue Talon has these very sharp razors that are attached to the palms of his hand. So a karate chop is a little bit more than that with him, or a slap. So anyway, it turns out the Blue Talon is he's very impressed with Daredevil, saying that you're the first worthy opponent I've had in a very long time. And the Blue Talon does mention he's from Japan. So we see, at least they got that part right. And the Blue Talon is actually offering Daredevil an out, saying, listen, no, he's not offering him an out. He's saying, listen, I'm going to praise you, before I kill you. Although he says he's forced to kill him. So I guess honor forced him to do this. Daredevil answers back that, basically, this is the punk move you're doing. And let's just get started with the fight. So the two go at it. Blue Talon is mostly on the offense here. Daredevil's doing a good job of dodging these blows, but Daredevil isn't really getting any shots in. Finally, Daredevil does get a shot in. He basically picks up a rock and he smashes it into Blue Talon's face. The police arrive finally. There were a few cases in San Francisco where the police were really needed and people were calling them and they just did not show up. So we see that there's a huge commotion, not only from the police but also from the media. So the media sent out all their television trucks, and they're going to carry out this fight live. And it turns out that Matt Murdock is there also. He's on crutches, and he's making a show that, hey, I'm here, and B, I'm kind of injured here. And, that looks like a crutch, but that might be his cane. So I might be wrong. Like I said, this is an atypical job from Gene Colan. Not his best effort. So anyway, the fight's going on. Blue Talon and Daredevil, they're going at it. Daredevil, he's using more agility, and he's mostly being on the defense. So I don't know. It seems like he's just trying to get Blue Talon to kind of tire himself out. Then we see that there's an explosion. Probably the Blue Talon might have hit a gas pipe. But I don't really know. Yeah, he did hit a gas pipe. So now there's a huge fire, and the fire is attracting more people. So there are more alibis who or eyewitnesses who can say that they saw Daredevil and Matt Murdock at the same place. So clearly, they're not the same people. Now, Matt Murdock, to a question to San Francisco's police commissioner. So he's saying that, listen, hey, can you explain the link between you and Daredevil? And the way Matt says it is that his brother Mike was really Daredevil, and that, and he died a year ago. So I don't know what's going on with this Daredevil. So yeah, so maybe he's exploiting his brother a little bit. I honestly don't know, because I didn't read that many Daredevils. So then we get to the conclusion. It looks like the fights ended. I believe what happened was when the gas pipe exploded, the Blue Talon also exploded, but Daredevil survived it. So the fight's over. Everyone's kind of milling around, breaking, kind of just hanging around, talking to themselves. And then it turns out that that Daredevil is walking through the crowd, and he's not saying anything to anyone. But Matt is thinking, hey, this is going really well. And Daredevil is thinking, haha, these fools have no idea that I tricked them. So then, so it turns out that Mr. Duran, not only did he have to see his top henchman blowing up, he also sees that Daredevil is allowed to swing out of the area. So he's still available to bother Mr. Duran. So, and also he doesn't have the secret identity of Daredevil anymore, the holdover Natasha. So yeah, Mr. Duran, he's been defeated on all levels here, but it's a minor setback because he still has these two hostages, and he'll eventually beat out the information that he needs about this globe. And it turns out, and I almost slipped and gave up the name, it turns out that actually Daredevil was the Black Panther. So I remember, I think it was in issue number 52 where Daredevil and the Black Panther actually did team up to stop some villain's plan. So the two have a history. It's not a deep history, but it was one forged in battle. So it meant a lot to both Daredevil, and it meant a lot to T'Challa, the Black Panther. I think the Black Panther might be missing the point here. So anyway, he's in his Black Panther outfit. He's already taken the Daredevil outfit off. It turns out that T'Challa didn't put on whiteface. So he didn't put on like white shoe polish. He actually had a latex mask that made him look like Daredevil. And of course, as we know, latex mask in the Marvel Universe, they work perfectly. T'Challa is oddly praising Matt in a way he really shouldn't be. And what he's saying is, wow, that Matt Murdock, what a guy. He inconvenienced me. He contacted me from like 3,000 miles away. He needed this favor that involved me not only impersonating him, but also facing this incredibly dangerous foe who might slice and dice me up. And T'Challa is saying, wow, that Matt Murdock, he's willing to go to any length to protect his secret identity. This sounded more like Matt was like, Matt took way more than he deserved here. And T'Challa shouldn't be saying, wow, what a guy. I guess the only thing T'Challa got out of this was that he kind of knows he knows Daredevil's secret identity. So that's kind of, I guess maybe that's kind of a big deal where one hero knows the identity of another. He kind of like thinks to himself when he's with his other heroes, I got a secret you don't. So anyway, T'Challa, it sounds like he has maybe some buyer's remorse here, because he doesn't understand why he did this. Uh, but nevertheless, he says that, he's going to keep the secret. And yeah, no hard feelings for really overstepping your bounds in terms of what you requested. But nevertheless, T'Challa said, yeah. So anyway, we're told that the next issue is The Indestructible Man. And yeah, it was a good issue. It was fun. It was very DC like. But again, there was nothing particularly spectacular about it. So anyway, that's my review of Daredevil issue number 92, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.